The book of Leviticus does give us a number of details introducing this vocation of priest and how to be a priest. My thumbnail definition, and this is going to be helpful, I think, to remember later on, a priest's responsibility is to bring the people to God. Now, that to be contrasted with the prophet's responsibility, which is to bring God to the people. So Moses is the archetype for prophet. He's the prophet all the other little prophets want to grow up to be like in the Old Testament. And Moses is the prophet who brings God to the people the best. A priest, however, brings the people to God. This is an honorable profession, but with that prestige comes a bit of danger. Leviticus 10 and specifically shows the dangers of being a priest. When you don't do things as God has prescribed, things can get pretty bad for you. One of the conversations about the priests in Leviticus people talk about are the clean and the unclean animals, the determinations between them, and what makes one, because a priest had to remain clean always, and as did the people have to remain clean. They had to avoid unclean animals. Why are some animals clean and some animals unclean? I've heard a lot of explanations for this. I've been to a lot of studies. I've done a lot of reading on it. And I've heard a number of different suggestions. There are some who say there's hygienic reasons to eat some animals and not eat other animals. Some animals are difficult to prepare and difficult to cook, and so you avoid those. Food is dangerous. Food can get us killed, and so you don't want to suffer trichinosis. Trichinosis is a disease that certainly affected pork. So normally when people talk about pigs, it could affect anyone, but it was particularly dangerous with pigs who were scavengers. And whatever you do, do not Google pictures of trichinosis. It's a terrible, like, alien disease. Creatures, it's just no, don't do it. It's terrible. And so the idea is, if you don't cook pigs right, you can really end up in trouble. So God's keeping them away from pork. Well, okay. I get that, sure. But all food can kill us if we don't cook it right. Chicken is a clean animal, but if you don't cook it right, you can get into trouble. So I don't know that hygiene, although certainly hygiene comes into play in other parts of Leviticus, and where you camp and where you put your tent, and whether the person next to you has mold or fungus, or all these other problems, leprosy, what do you do? The hygiene does play a role. I'm not sure hygiene answers best the question why some animals are clean and why some animals are unclean. Cultural differentiation is another suggestion that's given. The Philistines ate pigs, so you're not going to be like the Philistines. You're not going to be like them, so stay away from that animal. It's another possible interpretation there, cultural differentiation. Some suggest that actually issues of creation is at stake. The idea, you have to go with me on this one, creation theologians say that animals are clean if they're functioning where they were created to function. So the belief is that sin corrupts the world around, and we know that's true. Sin does corrupt the world around, and it gets it to the point that some animals are not functioning where they were created to be. For example, things in the water should have scales. Fish should have scales. If fish doesn't have scales, it's unclean. So catfish are unclean. Things with legs should walk on land. So things with legs in the water, unclean. So shrimp or lobster. My argument has always been, says who? Says who God can't make something, a fish without scales? Says who God can't make something with legs in the water? Says who God can't make a cloven-hoofed animal like a pig that doesn't chew his cud like a cow? Says who? So it's an interesting interpretation, and one that I think is kind of interesting to look through, but I don't know that it's ultimately convincing. The truth is, for me, the argument that's been the most convincing is, why are some animals clean and why are some animals unclean? Because God said. That's why. God said these animals are clean. God said these animals are unclean. Show your faith and do what God says. There are other rules that make sense of this. Like I say, that the hygiene does come into play with leprosy and avoiding fungus. Certain activities would render a person clean and unclean. Childbirth renders a person unclean. As a witness to the event twice, let me just say amen. It is a terrible, scary, disgusting, nasty, miraculous process, but the miracle doesn't happen until the very end, and then it's nasty again. So childbirth renders one unclean. 40 days for a boy, 80 days for a girl. Sorry, I don't make the rules. I just report the news on that. Touching a dead body renders one unclean. Blood renders one unclean. What's interesting is, in the Old Testament, unclean things corrupt clean things. So if something is clean and it touches something that's unclean, it renders that clean thing unclean. But in the New Testament, we see a reversal of this. And the next time you read the book of Luke, notice how many times Jesus is touching things. He touches the leper. He touches the mat with a dead person. The woman with the bleeding disorder touches Jesus. And what happens when these things which would have rendered the clean unclean in the Old Testament, those unclean things are cleansed in the New Testament. Yahweh has come out of his temple, and the dead are raised, and the lepers are cleansed. And the woman with the bleeding disorder, who would have been unclean and never able to worship, she is actually healed by touching Jesus. So all of these rules for clean and unclean are going to come into play, certainly in the New Testament. But as we look a little bit at what it means to be a priestly people, what it means for Israel to live set apart, God says, this is the expectation. My people live this way.